I want to begin by talking about how it's really important to accept where you are at in how those needs need to be met. And so the needs to your question that are relevant, that are important to this conversation.
And that's something that I've really had to, learn for myself. I couldn't receive love because I didn't know how to give it to myself. So understanding what love means to you specifically, because once you do, then you can attract it. Hey everybody, this is Bianca.
And this is Amelia.
And welcome to another episode of Evolve Ventures, where we are making evolution possible for growth-minded humans, just like every single one of you who shows up every single week through vulnerable lessons, stories, and technology. So, it is the first week of February, and everybody knows what that means. February is the Amelia's rolling her eyes already.
I literally was just like, wait, what? What does that mean?
What is in February? February is Valentine's Day, and I know everyone has their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, all that jazz about Valentine's Day, about love, about relationships, and this is a really, really great time for a lot of people, like whether you're single or in a relationship. It's also a really, really hard time for a lot of people, whether you're single or in a relationship. Some people are on one end of the spectrum, some people are on the other, some people are in the middle like me, where like sometimes I walk in CVS and I see all of like the Valentine's Day stuff and I get wicked petty and I'm just like, it's bullshit. And then there's other times where I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing and I'm so excited, right? It's just like that we're in a myriad of different experiences around this time of year. And something that I think is really, really important and what I wanted to bring to our listeners today is the idea and the concept that love looks different to every single one of us. Whether you're single, whether you're in a relationship, no matter what your status is, as human beings and as people, love looks different to every single one of us. And what we're going to be diving into today is, why is that? Where does our definition of love come from? What are our expectations of love? And whether or not we're getting that met actually, it's going to determine the quality of the relationships that we're in. And, Miss Amelia over here, the relationship expert, is going to give us, mama, is going to give us some tools and feedback from her really extensive knowledge about this and from her experience doing, couples counseling and coaching. So where this really came from is, I've had a lot of clients too, where I've done a lot of this work about their beliefs and their beliefs about themselves and their beliefs about the relationships that they've been in and how all of those have really compounded. And it's really brought them to where they are right now and how they feel about themselves and how they feel about love and if love is possible for them and what do they need from relationships. And in I don't even remember what episode it was. One of the most recent episodes, the problem isn't always what you think it is. I was talking about my client who, he thought he was in love with his friend, when in reality, she was just the only person that actually helped him get his needs met. So we talked to him about how he can get those needs met and what that would look like and what would it look like if he actually had a partner who could do that. Fun fact, he's actually in a relationship now, so wicked cool. That conversation led to him like attracting a partner and getting those needs met. So we'll see how that goes. But this really started for me, I think, like last year. So if you've been a part of Evolve Ventures, previously the Y Power podcast, you have been on a myriad of journeys with me and my terrible relationship history. It just is what it is. It hasn't been great. And so this last year has really been me trying to uncover, why, right? Why did I keep going through the same thing over and over and over again, hurting my own feelings, and then being like surprised about it when it actually happened? And something that I've really come to realize and something that I've come to understand is a lot of the reasons why I kept going through those things and I kept having those really similar situations and honestly like really big failures happen was because I didn't know what I actually needed when it came to love. I didn't know what I actually wanted. I didn't know what love was supposed to look like for me. And it led to like failure on failure on failure. And looking back at that, it can feel really heavy, right? Because it's like, I'm just such a mess up. Like, I can't believe I let this happen over and over again. But in all honesty, I'm actually really grateful for all of those situations. And it's not like this gratitude of, I'm so happy I got screwed over as much as I did, right? Like, it's nothing like that. But it's this gratitude of, I'm really glad that I was actually able to go through that and take the lesson from it. That's really where that gratitude is. And Em and I were just talking about that before we signed on and we started this episode. But I'm really grateful for a lot of the lessons that I took. And one of them, and one of the biggest ones, was really understanding, what do I need from love? And that's going to look very different for me than it is going to be for Amelia. So, Em, from your... I'm so out of breath because we were laughing so much before. Oh God, sorry for everyone hearing me like heavy breathing on this. So Em, seriously, you work one-on-one and two-on-one and two-on-two with so many people. What are the... what's the question I want to ask you? What are the different needs that we all have when it comes to a relationship? So like, love looks different to everybody, right? And we all have different things that we want, but I think there's all of these different needs and we all need them met in different ways, right? So we all have the same needs, but we all need them met in different ways. What are those from what you've seen? So like, does that question make sense? Can you dive into that?
I know what you're asking. I know what you're asking. I'm going to start. I was giggling because when you were talking just like about what you were saying and like, just like, I have so much respect for you for being vulnerable. Like obviously being on the podcast, like we are listened to all over the globe, right? So shout out to everyone that's here and listening. And we have loyal Evolve, formerly the Y Power podcast listeners that have been with us through the journey. And honestly, what we are so grateful for, who have allowed us to honor their journey and help them go through whatever they're going through. Right. And so that's so big for us. And for you be like, you've been so vulnerable in your relationship component, which by the way, is like the most intimate thing that people like just don't talk about. You mentioned like, I work with people all over the world on some of the biggest, hairiest challenges. And I don't actually mean physical hair. I mean like the most uncomfortable, psychologically discomforting, emotionally unregulated areas, which is intimate relationships oftentimes, right? And so talk about vulnerability and leading the way. So I'm really grateful for your level of vulnerability. Because I think that, and I've seen it firsthand. I've seen clients of yours been able to actually start to reflect on their own experiences and see their relationship history not as just a slew of failures and have a negative association attached to it, right? As if the belief that their love interest or their partner isn't out there, but rather like them seeing the ability of having a failed relationship as an opportunity and a really grateful one to learn about oneself. And that has been so, so important for so many people on this evolved journey, which has been really cool to see from my perspective. So I'll start with that. But I was giggling because of the fact that I was just thinking about needs and everything, right? Like we talk about needs whenever I'm coaching someone in this regard. Like we all, to your point, have needs, all of us, right? And how we go about getting those needs met, it's very different, right? All of us have different tastes, different desires, different interests, and it kind of brings this potion into what we call love, right? If we can meet these needs and to what extent. So I was giggling because Alan and I had a really beautifully vulnerable moment last night, which I'm sure he wouldn't mind me sharing, but it's kind of like, you know, when you go and you try something and you realize you don't like it and you kind of like kick yourself and you're like, dang, like I knew I didn't like that. With Alan, it's spicy food. He knows he doesn't like spicy food, but he'll like be optimistic and go out and try. And then he'll catch himself in that cycle and be like eating a spicy pad thai and be like, why did I do this? And it's funny, it's comical, but it really does relate to all of us in many different regards and on our relationship and our love journey, because sometimes we find ourselves catching ourselves in a similar relationship over and over and over again and just kind of like hitting the face to pavement right away. And so like Alan, when he sits in kind of that moment of like hanging his head down and like just kind of like pissed off at himself, but also feeling a little bit of like, why can't I break this cycle? He's broken it more times than not, right? Like it's because he's realizing in real time what his needs are and how he hasn't actually really, really admitted to himself what his needs are. Meaning he hates spicy food and he can just accept himself for how different he is in comparison to me. I love spicy food. How different he is in that, right? So because of this comparison set, he might not be meeting his needs as much, or he might be open-minded to overriding his needs. And why I bring that forward is because a lot of us find ourselves in this place. And because to this episode topic, love looks so different to us all, I think I want to begin by talking about how it's really important to accept where you are at in how those needs need to be met. And so the needs to your question that are relevant, that are important to this conversation, to understand for our listeners, to help them understand themselves and accept themselves to where these needs are and how they need to be met. It's just like Alan understanding and accepting his dislike and strong distaste for spicy food, and just like accepting that and meeting him where he's at in that, not judging himself, not hating himself for it, and not trying again and again in the same capacity. Instead, learning from that experience and saying, okay, this need is not going to be met if I continuously eat spicy food. So
can I give an example?
Please.
This is a little vulnerable, but I really do want to share this just so people have an understanding. So for anyone who knows or doesn't know, hi, I'm gay. And something that when I first, I'm in an energy today. Jesus.
I love it. It's a good vibe.
When I was dating before, I found myself consistently being attracted to girls with really masculine energy, right? So like not necessarily like tomboy dressing girls or anything like that. My ex was, but I found myself really attracted to like very like more masculine, dominant energy, because what I was telling myself was, well, that's what I need. I need someone who matches me. My need is I need someone a little bit more masculine, a little more like dominant, whatever, are more like mental, right? Like a little bit more just masculine energy, I guess. And the story I was telling myself was, well, if I can have someone like that, I'll feel safe enough to like go into my feminine, because it's like we'll offset each other. And I kept like attracting people who were that very masculine energy, right? Like who were more, I'm like blanking on the word, but just who had that more masculine energy, right? And I kept getting hurt in those scenarios. And it's like I kept telling myself this story, like, no, that's what I want. That's what I'm physically, sexually, emotionally attracted to. And it took me really doing this deep dive to understand I actually don't want that. Like, I think like sexually and physically, I'm attracted to like that more masculine, like dominant, like I'm a tough whatever energy. But in reality, what I really want and what I really need, what love looks like to me, is actually someone who can help me feel safe enough to be in that feminine, which is someone else who is very feminine. So simple example, but even something like that, you don't know what love, or you can't attract the love that you want unless you know what it actually is going to look like for you. And so when you're chasing the wrong thing, thinking it's what you really want and need, you're going to attract it, but it's not going to work out. And then you're going to keep asking, to that point with Alan getting spicy food, why do I keep doing this? And I keep getting upset about it, but then I do it again.
Right. Yeah, because you're really not understanding what your deepest needs are and accepting them for where they're at. And so, like, when I coach people and couples and partners at all different lengths of their relationship and conscious singles, right? Like, we all come back down to this very basic pyramid. And we were going over this with the team just recently, which is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you haven't heard about it, essentially, I want you to picture like a 5-tiered triangle, right? And there's 5 different tiers because essentially the theory of this triangle is that to have, at the very top is self-actualization. The very bottom is physiological needs. It lists these needs on top, stacked on top of each other. And if you want a visual, if you're a visual learner, we'll link this digital asset in the show notes so that you can see this while we're also just sharing this. Every single human, if you have a brain and if you have a heartbeat, you are very much driven by these needs. Your unconscious motivators, meaning like that which your brain is trying to optimize for, is to meet these needs. So you have physiological needs at the very bottom. So like, for example, air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, ability to be reproductive, right? That's the very bottom layer of needs. So the theory goes, if you don't have your physiological needs met, right? Or if they're not being met consistently, it's going to be really hard for you to get to the next level, which is the safety needs. So this is your ability to get and achieve personal security, your employment, resources, health, property, right? This is where intimate relationships can typically come in. I've been in relationships where my need was personal security with my partner so much because my former partners were actually a risk to my own personal safety. I remember being in the car, and I was telling Alan this story recently, being in the car with one of my past partners, and I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified because I was afraid that this partner was going to go so off the rails of their emotional regulation that he was actually going to hit the tree and I was actually going to die in the car. So that safety need could have never been met by that partner. And so what love looked like to me, it was not that. And because that safety need was not being met, it was really hard for me to achieve in that relationship the other tiers of this need pyramid, which is love and belonging, right? Friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection, the esteem level, which is respect, self-esteem, status recognition, strength, freedom. And then the last tier, which is that self-actualization standpoint and helping others realize their goals, their dreams, etc., the desire to become the most that one can be, right? So I work with a lot of people who want to self-actualize, right? Want to be the best person that they can be. But when I ask them, do you feel safe at home? Do you feel safe in your relationship? And I go through a series of questions, the answer is not a 10 out of 10. And so you can't, what I was telling our team, and Babe, you and I were talking about this, you really can't self-actualize and be the best that you can be if your physiological needs aren't met. If on top of that, your safety needs aren't being met. And then if your love and belonging, esteem, all of those, right, to this hierarchy of needs. So love looks different to us all. Yes, absolutely. And so I think it's going to be really important for our community to have a very keen understanding of where your needs are at. And then you can go into how can those be met? So for example, right, I didn't realize, but what was so important to me and what love looked like to me in a relationship was Alan, before we go to bed, he does his rounds. He literally does his rounds. And I was sharing this with our team. He, on his own accord, because who he aspires to be in the relationship, right? he wants to make sure that he can cultivate to the best of his ability a safe environment for his family, right? So he goes and he makes sure that he locks our doors, every single door, and double checks and triple checks before we go to sleep. And that's something that's meeting my needs. How? I never would have thought that that is the how in which that need needs to be met before I go to sleep. Right? So for me, love looks very differently than maybe Bianca's, right? We all have safety needs, right? We all have physiological love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization needs. But how those get met, you never really know unless you try, right? And that's the thing. So because it looks different, I think that that's the journey that we all have. And not going out there and trying and failing in those relationships, and then picking yourself up and saying, what can I learn about myself, my needs, and how these can be met, right? Because you'll find so much about yourself when it comes to the relationship and the love world and what your love languages are, only if you contemplate when things aren't actually going your way, when you might not feel loved, right? It's a lot easier to go cope or externally numb than it is to go inwardly and reflect and say, like, well, what does love really mean to me? You know, and I think that that's really the beauty of this inner work that we do all the time with our clients, with our community and our events and on our IG lives. And so, yeah, I think that that's pretty much like the basics. We could go into love languages, conscious love languages, and all that jazz, but I think that that's probably too much for one episode. But hopefully that answered your question.
No, it
We're
did.
like way over time.
No, well, especially with the energy that I came in with this episode, it's like, y'all, I'm sorry, we just like love bombed all of you with like our energy, so I apologize. I think the really big takeaway from this is that we all have, to Amelia's point, I'm just going to reiterate what she said. We all have different needs as human beings, and you have to be able to understand what your needs are for yourself. Like, what is it that you really need? And be okay with that and understand what that is and learn how to give it to yourself. Because once you can do that, then you'll be able to accept it from somebody else. And that's something that I've really had to, learn for myself. I couldn't receive love because I didn't know how to give it to myself. So understanding what love means to you specifically, because once you do, then you can attract it.
So true. I'll close with this. Every single relationship talks client that I have, or like any free relationship talks call that I'll do with clients, I'll typically ask, like, what does love mean to you? What is a relationship? What does it mean to be in a relationship with someone? And it's interesting because everyone has various different definition, right? What love looks like to them is very different than maybe even their partner sitting next to them. And that's really cool because I think that there's so much to grow out of that. But I realized through my introspection and reflecting on with myself is, for me, love looks like growth. So the purpose of my intimate relationships, and quite frankly, all of my relationships, is rooted in growth. If there is not growth as a component to our relationships, I know, and I've had to go through the journey of accepting and being okay with that and actually loving this part of me, that if there isn't growth, then that's not something that I'm attracted to. Intimately, business-wise, coaching client-wise, like that's just my thing. Why? Because the root of what love looks like to me is growth. And so for every single one of our listeners, it might not be growth for you, right? What is that root? And I think that what tree can grow and can blossom out of that is your unique love fern, if you will. But I think that understanding what is your root to what love looks like to you, that's really, really beneficial. And for every client that, I've coached through this, it's like, oh, once they understand their root, they kind of realize why maybe some things didn't work out. Some of my past relationships that also weren't rooted in growth, they ended for a reason, right? They didn't get along for a reason, but we pulled those reasons, we reflect on those, and then we help to redefine what love looks like for us. And that's really this journey. So we hope that this episode was super valuable and helpful for you. In closing, what is your episode suggestion?
118, what does it mean to love yourself?
Oh, baby.
Oh, baby.
Oh, baby. My episode suggestion for anyone that wants to continue this love journey on this February, 156, forgiveness is for you, not for the other person.
How does that tie into this? Just so people can have some reference.
I would say, to what you and I were chatting about a little bit earlier, every flop, every date that you hated, every like moment if you've been ghosted or stood up, or if you had a fight or whatever, like anytime it didn't result in the way that you wanted it with respects to your relationships, especially if you had a breakup or especially if you had a heartbreak or something and you're struggling through forgiveness, when you realize that like forgiveness truly is for you to this episode and not for the other person, you start to realize how important that in your journey of forgiveness of the other person and of the situation of what happened, you start to surrender to all of the lessons that can come to you in that forgiveness, because ultimately like everything ends and closes for a specific reason unique to your journey. And only if you're willing to kind of be open to those deeper understandings, those deeper contemplations, will you be able to extrapolate some of that and how that relates to the love looking different for us all. It looks different in correlation to how you're willing to contemplate after you have a heartbreak, after things don't go your way, and who you show up on the other side as when it comes to all that.
Well said. Thank you so much to everyone for listening. We hope this added value to you and your life. If you are looking for a group of other growth-minded people who are on this same journey, who are looking to find what love means to them, looking for ways on how to forgive themselves and how to be the best version of themselves, join Evolve Ventures Society. The link is in the bio. Oh. It is an incredible group of truly, truly incredible people. And we have more and more people joining every day. People are on there sharing their personal stories, sharing parts about themselves, sharing about their lives, sharing all of their pets and all the memes and all that fun stuff. So if you want to be part of an incredible growth-minded community, join Evolve Venture Society on Facebook, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.